Okay, I think that was a generous 10 seconds. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for the budget hearing meeting of the Pioneer Valley Regional School District School Committee. Because we are meeting remotely, we are also at the school for any members that do show up. There are a few of us who are here, but we need to take a roll call vote. So I will just call your name for the members of the school committee, and you can just let me know if you are present. Melissa Osborne.
Present.
Steve Martin.
Here.
Stephanie Arroyo.
Here.
Gretchen Kelton.
Present.
Raina Dastis.
Here.
Michelle Giarusso. And Melissa Gary, present. Okay. Are there any citizen comments?
Sorry, I was on mute. I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
I'm having technical difficulties with my other device, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Are there any citizens' comments? Okay. Lucy?
Is this being recorded?
This is being recorded.
Hi.
Hi, Lucy. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if this is the time when I can inquire about something that I didn't see in the budget proposal, or if I should wait until later.
Sure. So you can do both. If citizens' comments, you can share if there's something you want to say, and then at the end you can bring it up. It's really up to you. Either way.
Okay. Okay. I was just specifically curious about what line item the before and after school program might be in. Just I know that the program hasn't been established yet, and you're still working on investigating situations and stuff, but I know that there was an identified number that last over the summer, so I was just wondering where that sits in the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any other citizens' comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any hand raised. I just want to acknowledge everyone for joining us. Thank you to the administration, our town representatives, community members, school committee members, staff. It takes all of us to review and understand the budget, and we really appreciate your presence here tonight. So thank you. Okay, without further ado, I am going to let Jordan kick us off with the presentation.
All right, thank you. All right, Melissa, can you see that all right, everybody?
Yep, looks good.
Yeah, I want everyone to be able to see, but I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
But I hope everyone can see. Great. Yes, obviously echoing what Melissa said, thank you everybody for being here despite the change of venue and the tough weather. So hopefully everybody got a lot of exercise shoveling today. Yeah, I'm really excited to present this budget. In some respects, it continues to be somewhat of a tough budget year, but there's tons of pieces of optimism about the spending plan itself. So I really look forward to sharing a lot of positivity as well as some of the more difficult aspects of this budget. So, I will jump into it. This presentation afterwards will be available online. The actual budget itself that we sent out is also available within this presentation. You just click on this hyperlink. We this year put it into a Google document so people can peruse it at their leisure. That's a big enhancement for people who really want to get into the finer details of the budget. So the budget priorities, and overall in this presentation, obviously some people are joining for the first time in this process, whereas other people have been here throughout the process. So I'm going to try to speak to both groups throughout the presentation. So there'll be aspects that are review, and there will be new stuff for people who've been here for every presentation. But the priorities that we've established and discussed since the beginning are making these strategic investments that we first started talking about in October of 2023. And these are investments that we're going to make by using some of our fund balance, some of our revolving funds that we built up over time to make some investments. Those investments are in curriculum, staff compensation, and PVR's facilities. So those investments have started in FY25. They're going to continue in FY26. And the other thing that we want to accomplish with this budget is to prepare ourselves for the MSBA, the School Building Authority eligibility period that we were invited into in December, and prepare ourselves financially for a successful process. So the timeline. So we've been meeting regularly since December. Although we had several meetings in December and January, as we've talked about in the past, a lot of the action really comes at the end of January. And then we're at this meeting at the beginning of February. So the past 2 weeks have been hectic with the governor's budget coming out, and then updated information about a lot of things, but most impactful, the increase in health insurance rates. So the process in terms of the district and school committee portion is coming to an end, but obviously there's still then the town meetings throughout the spring. But we have this meeting this evening, and then on February 13th, the school committee will vote whether to approve the budget. So one more week for our process. So as I said, we've been doing different iterations of both the budget and this presentation. And so for people who have been here, the big change from what we discussed on January 28th to now, well, there's no change to overall assessment. So we had been discussing a 3.7% assessment increase over the last few meetings. That's going to stay the same. And that is something we've been discussing since the beginning of the process, trying to control expenses so that local costs grow between 1.8 and 2.8%. The number that we ultimately landed at thus far in the process is 2.49% local increase. So that's wonderful. But that kind of ignores some big changes that have happened since version 2.0. So now we're on the third iteration of the budget. And one big change that's happened since the second iteration is that health insurance costs, we now have confirmation for the Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust, are going to go up between 18 and 20%. We thought it was going to be more 10, 11%. People were at the meeting very surprised, and there was a lot of talk about how is this going to be feasible? This is so much, but we have instead of taking that approach of how is it going to be possible, what we've decided to do is to not make big changes in terms of either the spending that have been in previous versions, or any changes in the revenue side, specifically the assessments. So what we've decided to do is to deploy more of our reserves. So again, it's good that we've had some prudence to develop and build up reserves over time. So now, instead of funding the feasibility study in the FY26 budget, we'll look to do that in the FY27 budget. So for FY26, what we're going to do instead of the feasibility study is use more school choice to pay for that really large increase in health insurance, and that'll prevent us from having to ask for more in assessments or reduce anything on the expenditure side of the ledger. So we are moving forward cautiously. It's a huge increase, but we feel good about our plan and don't feel that it's time to panic. We're going to continue to lead without any panic despite this big increase. So that is the big change, just much higher insurance increase year over year than we've seen in the recent history. So now I'm going to jump into expenditures, but when thinking about expenditures, right, whenever we're thinking about presenting a budget, the spending plan is kind of the most exciting part of the budget. And so before diving right into the section, I just wanted to briefly talk about the budget process and what we're thinking about. So when we're putting together a budget and thinking about how to spend the money, I think what we're always trying to think about is how can we provide a really great education to our students, and how can we do so in a manner that's affordable. Within the presentation, there's going to be quite a bit about affordability, but I also, before jumping into it, wanted to talk about the enthusiasm I have for this budget and the budget book, which we had anticipated this being in person, everybody having one in their hand, but the budget book really does, I think, a better job of summarizing all the really great enhancements and investments we've been making in the district. But I did want to, before going too deep into how well we've controlled costs, talk about some of those great investments. So in the budget book on the 4th page, I know not everybody's looking at it, but just for reference, there's a list of the 10 full-time positions the district's added since FY23, and all those positions remain in this budget. Again, despite some difficult conditions, we've maintained and continue to invest in some really important student-facing positions. So 10 full-time positions, and those continue to be funded. And I also, before getting too far into expenditures, just want to once again mention in the newspapers they were mentioned as landmark collective bargaining agreements, and they really are. And so that was a great success we had last year between the school committee and the collective bargaining units to come to landmark agreements that not only provide 3% COLAs for the next 3 years, but provide generous minimum salaries and a lot of other things. But before getting too far in, I really just wanted to celebrate those things again. We continue to make investments, we continue to add positions, we continue to compensate our staff better. And at the same time, what the presentation will focus on is, while making really important investments, continue to be prudent and control costs. So, but I did want to start with kind of as a reminder to everyone, this budget has a lot of really great stuff in it. I encourage everyone to look at the budget book, which provides additional detail. But just again, not to lose sight of the fact that despite always focusing on controlling costs, there's some really important investments that are really worthwhile to continue to highlight and celebrate. So expenditures, without further ado. So as I was saying, the big change from version 2.0 to version 3.0, there's some small changes, but again, the big change, health insurance increase, right? An additional $167,846 than was in the version 2.0. So version 3.0 has even more money in health insurance. And again, the estimates in the previous version were based on pretty healthy increases, 10-11%. So in addition, another $167,846. Some small increases in addition to those, and then there was a little bit of a decrease in the out-of-district special needs tuitions from what we had previously estimated. But overall, net impact of those things is an increase of over $156,926. And this graphic just summarizes how we essentially intend to pay for that $156,000 increase. And as you can see, from version 2.0 to version 3.0, the all fund spending goes up, and that is paid for completely with offsets, meaning we're using more school choice to pay for it. So the total offsets go from version 2.0, $2,117,346 up to $2,274,269. But the FY26 local share of the budget remains unchanged. So what that means, the share of the budget that contributes to assessments remains unchanged. So the long and the short is we use school choice, more school choice, to ensure that we wouldn't have to increase assessments or reduce expenditures. So that was the decision that was made when we saw that large health insurance increase. That's how we decided to deal with that issue. So again, as I said, there's going to be a lot of graphics, information about controlling costs and controlling expenditures over time. So from the FY23 to the FY26, the draft FY26 budget, what I'm sure people understand is in FY23, Warwick was still a member of the regional school district. FY24 was the first year that Warwick wasn't. So local fund spending between FY23 and FY24 decreased, fairly substantially. And then, which I guess I should also highlight, and we'll touch on again later in the presentation, but, having a few students leave from Warwick, didn't necessarily mean that expenses would decrease. That was a lot of good hard work to identify areas where we could save money and actually reduce expenses. Because when you think about having 15 or 20 students less, that doesn't necessarily guarantee a big decrease, and certainly in certain fixed costs, no decrease at all. But we're happy with the fact that we were able to reduce spending from FY23 to FY24 down to $14,720,938. Then from FY24 to FY25, there was a slight increase, which we'll see on a percentage basis was a 0.64% increase. And then in FY26, this is what a 2.49% increase looks like, an increase to spending of $15,185,567. Again, looking at it from a graphic, bar graph perspective, FY23, Warwick still in the district. FY24, Warwick no longer in the district. Large decrease in local fund spending, and then gradual increase, and a little bit bigger of an increase this year than last year. Again, really big increases in insurance costs, 18 to 20%, but overall local fund spending increase of only 2.49%. So we've worked really hard at controlling costs. And again, just looking at those same changes from a percentage perspective, from FY23 to FY24, negative 3.33%, as Warwick exited the district, and then 0.64% increase from FY24 to FY25, and then another 2.49% increase for this year. So again, although it's a larger increase, right, it's in a environment where we have 18 to 20% insurance costs. We have very good contracts now for both of our bargaining units with much larger COLAs than they've received in the past. With wage growth on average much closer to 6%, but we're happy that we're still able to control our overall spending growth at 2.49%. We think it's a pretty impressive feat. And the reason that we're focused on both making good investments, but also controlling overall expenditure growth is we'll see when we talk more about revenues. The one category that often will grow quickly if your expenditures grow, especially in our situation, is assessments. So we want to, when we're planning, we're always cognizant of being really good partners with the towns and trying to mitigate expenditure growth, which could then ultimately lead to assessment growth. So that's something we're cognizant and proud of the fact that despite in a really fast, especially for educational spending and insurance inflationary environment, where we were able to bring in a budget at 2.49%. And whether it's FY25 at 0.64% or FY26 at 2.49%, if you look around and read newspaper articles, you won't see many schools doing as well in terms of their ability to control costs. So we are happy with what we've been able to accomplish the last couple of years. And what's driving expenditure growth, multitude of factors, insurance and benefits, not just the insurance, that's the biggest piece, but even our contribution to Franklin Regional Retirement, it grew faster this year than it had in past years, so that assessment increased. So insurance and benefits overall. Student need is always a driver that can change, and we've seen some more transportation and tuition needs for special needs. We've had opportunities where lower paid faculty leave, and then a really great experienced member applies, applicant applies, and we hire someone that costs more than the person leaving. And that's an investment I think the district's generally happy to make to attract really good talent, but there's a cost there. Again, similar to the special needs, just overall student need is growing, and we have to address that in the budget. And then, something again that I think the district rightfully is very proud of. We have impressive landmark contracts, and those are wonderful, and we're happy to pay for those increases. But the better the contract, the more it costs. So those are some of the things that drive expenditure growth. So that's the expenditure picture. So overall, with the expenditures, I just want to say we continue to make a lot of impressive investments, adding full-time positions, supporting our students, succeeding at enhancing the student experience, while at the same time ensuring that the education, the really great education we're providing, remains affordable. So getting into the revenue picture and really providing greater insight into why we need to control expenditures is when we look at the revenue side of the ledger, that those are not growing as fast. So first, looking at the change between version 2.0 and 3.0, kind of the change is no change. Assessments remain at 3.7% year over year increase from FY25 to the draft FY26 budget, and revenue growth is 2.49%. And I think that what most people would notice with those two numbers is the fact that assessments need to grow at 3.7% just to grow your overall pot of revenues at 2.49%. So what I think most people would probably realize when looking at that is that non-assessment revenue categories are growing much slower than 3.7%, or one could say much slower than the rate of inflation, and especially the inflation we're currently seeing in the public sector, education sector, where benefits are quite expensive. So we'll get into the so between 2 and 3, no big changes, but what remains the case is that assessments are the category of revenues that are growing faster than other categories. So specifically, when we look at all categories of revenue, what you can see is town assessments FY25 to FY26 growing at 3.7%, and then a lot of other categories. And it is, I'm sure everyone realizes, it's really what's important are how fast are some of the big categories growing. And the second biggest category to assessments is Chapter 70, and the district is, in a hold harmless position. So we aren't going to see big increases in Chapter 70 year over year. This year, based on the governor's budget, we're looking at 1.99%. So that's a very big portion of our overall revenue budget, but it's growing much slower than the rate of inflation. And when we look at most of the other most of the other categories are pretty stagnant, and any big increases are in smaller categories. So that's really the reason that town assessments need to grow at 3.7% is to keep up with overall expenditure growth of 2.49%, because most of the other revenue categories just aren't growing at a pace fast enough to make it so that assessments can grow slower than 3.7%. Over time, we hope tuition revenue can increase to partially defray the need for assessment increases at the current rate of 3.7% in this budget. In past years, obviously, assessments haven't grown that fast, and we'll look at that as well in some other slides. One thing we're doing to try to help defray the increase or slow the increase in assessments. So the previous, excess and deficiency is a pot of money that is there to help you manage assessment growth. That's really what E&D is for. So FY23, we're appropriating a really large amount of E&D, not really a sustainable amount. In the past couple of budgets, we tried to reduce that, and I would have liked to reduce it further, but given the other revenue categories, it didn't seem appropriate because, again, we want to, as much as possible, try to mitigate assessment growth and keep it reasonable. So when we saw the other revenue categories, we decided to appropriate a little bit more, go from $350,000 to $380,000 to hopefully make the assessment growth more manageable. So that is the recent history of our use of excess and deficiency. Town operating assessments. This is just giving a bigger, longer timeline and kind of brief history over the last few years. So the FY22 number starts with 4 member towns, $9,293,071, and then to make a comparison between what happened with Warwick in the district, and then once it left the FY23, the first number looks at the amount of town assessments for just the 3 towns that were also in the district in FY24, so we could compare how those assessments grew. So from FY23 to FY24, what we can see is the ultimate final budget assessment number in FY24 was actually a reduction from the FY23 number without Warwick. So assessments went from $8,684,618 down to $8,558,898. So in FY24, there were some factors that were more in our favor, both a large increase in tuition into the district from Vernon, Vermont, and an increase in transportation aid, an increase in rural aid. So there were a lot of factors that were helping on the revenue side. So we were able to actually reduce assessments after Warwick left the district, which was something that we were really proud of, our ability to manage that transition in such a way that towns actually paid less in assessments. And then last year, FY24 to FY25, the current budget that we're administering now, there was a 3% assessment increase, and what we're looking at next year is 3.7% for FY26. So, as I said, 3.7%. It's not a huge number. It's a little bit more than we probably would have liked. However, when looking in a multi-year period, we see that there over time, 3.7% is a little bit of an outlier. On average, assessment growth has been more moderate than that, and that's something that we're proud of, because what I have here is a couple quotes from the Rural Schools Commission report in July 2022. So, this is the report that was looking at just rural education overall and the difficulty of providing affordable education in a sparsely populated rural environment with declining population. And what that report really pointed to is, the parts that we have highlighted. School districts that have experienced years of declining student enrollment remain saddled with high per pupil legacy costs. And there's more there, but I won't read it all. And then the second quote says, slight and even moderate reductions in enrollment have a minimal impact on school or district costs. And I just want to kind of contrast that with the assessment picture, where actually once Warwick left the district, we actually succeeded at controlling costs in such a way that we could reduce assessments and then have managed them pretty well over the last couple of years. So what I think is that points to is that we've done a good job in our fiscal stewardship of the district, right? The last part are really mostly my words. Diseconomies of scale is supposed to make reducing expenses nearly impossible in rural or sparsely populated districts, but we've achieved exactly this in PVRSD. So once Warwick departed the district and we had slightly lower enrollment, we haven't needed to have the same amount of assessments or the same amount of spending to support the district. So we've succeeded in controlling expenditures to an extent that has meant reasonable assessment growth since Warwick left the district. Specifically, what that assessment growth has looked like over time is, if you look at FY23 to FY26, the compound annual growth rate has been 1.73%. So another way to think about that is, had we just had 1.73% assessment increases from FY23 to FY24, and then 24 to 25, and FY25 to this year, FY26, we would have arrived at the same amount of total assessments as we see in the FY26 draft budget. So I think that's a good thing. 1.73% a year is moderate assessment growth. I think certainly below the rate of inflation, despite a lot of expenditure categories that without control would have been growing much faster than inflation. And in addition, a theme I think that I hope will be recurring in this presentation is we want to be good partners with the towns. As we looked at our overall reserves and our financial position at the beginning of FY24, we are in the position to be able to return $500,000 to the towns. So not only have we had moderate assessment growth, we actually were able to return money to the towns, and through some grant funding have been able to invest almost $200,000 in the town-owned elementary buildings. So yes, this year is a little bit of a tough budget environment. There's a 3.7% proposed assessment increase. But over the past 3 years, we hope that we've proven commitment to any educational investments we make, ensuring that those are also affordable for our town partners. Again, just another way to look at that, especially FY23 to FY24, what happened with both a reduction in assessments and a return of money is, if you look at the third line down, FY23 to FY24 change in operating assessments, pretty modest increases there. $20,103 for Bernardston, $18,543 for Leiden, and negative $164,276 for Northfield. And then on top of that, the fourth line down shows the refund amounts to each town. And then the final bottom line, the total change in funding to schools, everything's in red, because year over year, every town from FY23 to FY24 actually, once you factor in the refund, had a reduction in the amount of money provided to the schools. So that's something we're really proud of for FY24. And then obviously moving forward, we've in FY25, 3% increase, in FY26, 3.7% increase in assessments. We wanted to continue to maintain affordable education. Right, so again, just summarizing what I said, FY24, negative 1.45% change in assessments between FY23 and FY24, FY25, 3%, FY26, 3.7%. And in addition, and this is really hopefully kind of bringing both things together, the expenditure and revenue side. Expenditures, we want to continue to make investments because if we continue to make investments in our education, hopefully it can help us attract students, and more tuition students mean more revenue, which reduces our reliance on assessments. So, and the good thing and the reason we want to continue to sustain investments and make smart investments to our educational program and student-facing investments is because we've seen a return on that investment. In FY23, Vernon tuition was $199,904. By FY25, it's now $433,400. We hope to continue to attract more students, and maybe we'll have eventually a tuition agreement with Winchester, New Hampshire as well. We'd like to retain more students as well, whether that's reducing the departures to Franklin Tech or school choice and charter. We have seen that start to happen. We were paying over $1 million in choice and charter in FY23. FY25, we're projecting $800,000 in the same for FY26. So again, we're hoping by making investments, the choice charter expenditure will go down, and again, that would take pressure off of assessments. And then, something out of our hands, but previously mentioning the Rural Schools Commission, there is some political momentum for increasing rural aid to districts. That's increased from FY23 $175,088 up to $359,000 in this current fiscal year. The governor's budget for FY26 has that not growing, but it's still grown a lot in just a couple of years. And there's talk about changing the Chapter 70 formula to potentially be more advantageous to districts in the position of pioneer. There's a lot of districts across the Commonwealth that don't have very fast Chapter 70 growth, and it's a big revenue component for most districts. So if that's growing really slowly, ultimately assessments will increase to make up the difference if Chapter 70 isn't growing at the rate of inflation. So long story short, this year is a little tougher for assessments, growing instead of 3% at 3.7%. But we hope and we do think we see some signs that the investments we're making are paying off and can hopefully moderate assessment growth in the future. And, staying on the topic of assessments, so the number 3.7%, I've mentioned a lot of times for FY26, but the complexion or the distribution of those assessments are a little different than it has been in the past. So these next slides provide a little more information on exactly how the assessments are divvied up, both the formula and specific numbers, how the assessments are divvied up among the between the towns. So the first step in determining assessments to each of the towns is based on the minimum local contribution, which is determined by the state. And the second piece is the amount that's above the minimum local contribution. That's a formula that's outlined in our district agreement. So the minimum local contribution, we have no control over. Each of our towns gets a number that's provided by DESE. We put that in, and then any additional assessments that are more than what the town is statutorily required to provide to the district are divvied up based on our district agreement formula. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more. So minimum local contribution is the minimum that a city or town must appropriate from property taxes and other local revenues for the support of schools. That's based on the Education Reform Act of 1993. And so when we look at the assessments in the draft assessments for FY26, I think the thing that's most apparent and is highlighted in this manila yellowish brown color is that Bernardston's year-to-year change in assessments, the growth in assessments is 9.31%, whereas Leiden and Northfield are much smaller percentages, Leiden 0.5%, Northfield 0.48%. And the reason for that, the biggest part of the reason is the change in the minimum local contribution. So looking from FY25 to 26 in Bernardston's minimum local contribution grows from $1,656,436 to $1,839,118. Whereas when we look at the minimum local contributions of Leiden and Northfield, they are, for Leiden, the minimum local contribution to Pioneer actually decreases, and Northfield's goes up by also decreases. So for both Leiden and Northfield, the minimum local contribution decreases. So that is why relative to Bernardston, both Leiden and Northfield's assessments grow at a very slow amount, and Bernardston essentially takes on Bernardston does take on the vast majority of the assessment increase. So whereas the district overall is only increasing assessments by 3.7%, the distribution of the assessments is much different than it has been in past years, and Bernardston takes on most of the increase because of that change in minimum local contribution. Why did the minimum local contribution change so much? Well, we want to provide more information about that. So this is just showing the magnitude of the change. So Bernardston's minimum local contribution to Pioneer went up by 11.03%. Leiden's went down by 6.53%, and Northfield's went down by 1.77%. And the reason, there's a couple of reasons. Seemingly the biggest reason, the reason that anyone's minimum local contribution grows is based on the total pot. How that grows is based on the municipal revenue growth factor. And there are several things that make that grow, including levy limit growth, state aid, and prior year local receipts. And what you'll see is that Bernardston's municipal revenue growth factor grew very quickly, both relative to Leiden and Northfield, but relative to most municipalities in the state. So there's 351 municipalities. Bernardston's municipal revenue growth factor of 6.67% is actually the 15th highest out of those 351 municipalities. Leiden's growth of 3.83% is 239th out of 351, and Northfield's growth of 3.41% is actually 306th out of 351 municipalities. So in terms of the revenue growth part, Bernardston was very fast when compared to other municipalities in the state, and Leiden and Northfield were both more towards the bottom. The second piece that explains why Bernardston contributed more to the district than in past years is based on enrollment. So Bernardston's Franklin Tech enrollment went down 16.67% from FY25 to what's projected in FY26, whereas Leiden and Northfields are both projected to grow. So with your your minimum local contribution, it is your minimum local contribution is one number that grows based on municipal revenue growth factor, but it is divvied up between all of the regional school districts that you're a member of. So all of our towns are both members of Pioneer and Franklin Tech. So as Bernardston's enrollment increases in Pioneer and decreases at Franklin Tech, a larger portion of their total minimum local contribution goes to Pioneer, and a smaller portion goes to Tech. So there are, in both of the ways that minimum local contribution to Pioneer could grow, Bernardston led the pack when compared to Leiden and Northfield.
Excuse me, Jordan. Sam, I see your hand raised. We're going to take questions at the end. So we have your name written down and the slide that you have a question on. So we will come back to you at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Melissa, because I know I'm trying to go quickly because I want to respect both time and the people who have questions. So I know some of this people want additional information, but so in terms of, these are the numbers provided by DESE. So this just provides additional information about why the minimum local contribution from Bernardston to the district increased so much from FY25 to 26. So the overall minimum local contribution we see of Bernardston. So if you look at the last line that just says minimum local contribution, so the total from Bernardston in FY25 determined by DESE was $2,009,530. In FY26, it's $2,163,661. So the overall amount grew, and that was because of the municipal revenue growth factor. And the other thing we can see is that the district share of Bernardston's minimum local contribution went from 82.43% to Pioneer to 85%. Again, that's because there are fewer Bernardston students attending Tech and more attending Pioneer. So the pot of money that Bernardston needs to contribute towards a minimum local contribution grew, and then the proportion of that money that goes to Pioneer also grew. So that is why Bernardston's minimum local contribution to the district went up so much. And the opposite is, and I think the other important thing to think about, obviously, is that this also means that Bernardston's tech assessment will likely go down. So that is a mitigating piece. Leiden, it's the opposite story, right? Now, minimum local contribution still grew, but because there was a municipal revenue growth factor that wasn't as large, not by as much money. So the total pot went from $595,075 to $629,768. But what we see is the share of that money that goes to Pioneer went from 91.76% down to 81.04%. So that's why Leiden is actually providing a smaller minimum local contribution in FY26 to Pioneer than they were in FY25. Northfield, similar to Leiden, total pot of money for the minimum local contribution grows from FY25 to FY26 from $3,490,000 to $986 to $3,644,939. But again, similar to Leiden, we see that the district share of total foundation going to Pioneer goes down from 80.46% to 75.69%. So a larger pot of money, but a smaller amount of it actually goes to Pioneer. So the result is a decrease in minimum local contribution to Pioneer. The overall impact is that although assessments are increasing by 3.7%, Bernardston takes on a lot larger share of that burden. The other piece that I talked about in a couple slides previously was the amount over minimum local contribution. That's based on the formula set by the district agreement, and the assessment percentage determines the amount over minimum local contribution. The assessment percentage is based on enrollment in the district, so actual district town resident students in the district, and to get an assessment percentage. So in that area, Bernardston's assessment percentage increased slightly from 40.89% to 41.46%. Leiden's increased from 9.05% to 9.53%, and Northfield's actually decreased from 50.06% to 49.01%. So in terms of the amount above the minimum local contribution, both Bernardston and Leiden are taking on a little bit more of that because they have more students in the district as a percentage than they did previously. And so that's the information about the operating assessments. For capital assessments, there are several projects, fire panel, these are PVRS projects, some cameras, and possibly some software as well to help control the heating system. The total cost of those projects is $80,000. $50,000 of that will be paid to school choice. So that's what we were talking about with strategic investments. So using our reserves to try to mitigate the amount of assessments we need from towns. So only $30,000 of the $80,000 of projects will be paid for by the towns. And using the formula that is in the district agreement, those capital assessments, $30,000 of capital assessments are determined by formula. And ultimately, it's $10,020 to Bernardston, $3,105 to Leiden, and $16,875 of capital assessments to the town of Northfield based on that formula. So yeah, that is most of the that's the presentation. Obviously, there's still going to be time for questions. Coming up next is still continuing to refine the budget and the exciting conclusion of the process with the school committee vote on next Thursday, February 13th, 2025, 6 p.m. at the PVRS library. So that will be the end of the process, but obviously now an important part of the process is getting feedback from all the residents and hearing feedback about the presentation, the budget in general. So happy to take questions now.
Thank you, Jordan. That was excellent. Very well done. I can tell that you put time into it, also knowing that this wasn't exactly a planned venue to be holding our meeting tonight. So thank you.
Oh,
Sam. Sam, are you still here? You may be on mute. Okay. Sam, we'll come back to you. Kathy?
Is this the appropriate time, Melissa and Jordan, to ask about some capital improvements at PVRS?
Sure.
So Jordan, you had not but 2 or 3 slides ago, you had capital projects for Pioneer. And my questions are a little bit more specific in terms of either student interest or safety. Have there been conversations about replacing the middle school lockers? I have 3 questions. I'll just put them out there and then we can do 1, 2, or 3. So lockers for the middle schoolers, which has been a multi-year concern and isn't improving at this point. The bricks out by the snack shack, and conversation around repair or replacement of the tractor for the custodians. And I don't know, I don't know whether there have been conversations around those items. Maybe things are in the works. Maybe things have been talked about, but they're on deck for next year, et cetera.
yeah. Thank you, Kathy. And great to see you. I haven't heard anything about the middle school lockers. The bricks, that was in FY24's budget, and it didn't get completed, but we do intend to complete it this spring once the weather warms up. So it's just been a little bit of a delay getting it completed, but we certainly know that's a priority. And then the tractor, I have had some discussions with Gretchen. What we did last year is bought a new snow blower, something new that's a little more maneuverable. And we've had good luck with our plowing service. So I think, that's where we're at. But Gretchen did mention that, long term, it's something to look at as well.
Okay. I would just like to share, as I sort of did at the beginning, and, Annie may need some time to really inspect those lockers down in the 7th grade and 8th grade hallway, but they're showing their age. Middle schoolers are really rough on facilities, and it's time. The other thing would be with the tractor is I understand about, buying a snow blower, et cetera. But I would also just put forth that there are other tasks that snow blower can't do. It can't move the risers for graduation if we have a graduation ceremony outside, et cetera. And I know that the snow blower probably takes 2 or 3 times longer on those large sidewalks, et cetera. So I just bring those things to folks' attention and hope that they are getting addressed.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to have Patricia respond to the lockers also. She has a comment.
Hi, Kathy. Hold on. Hi, Kathy. It is nice to see you. Thank you. And excellent question. With the lockers, I think those would come under the category of a large item that we would want to be cautious about moving forward with until we have figured out what's happening long-term with the building plan. Because we wouldn't want to invest in something like that if 3 years down the road there's a building project and perhaps the hallway is modified, or middle school is located in another part of the building. So that's something I wanted to share with you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, comments? Stephanie?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say how intelligent I thought it was for you to move the feasibility study forward. And I thought that was a great move.
Thank you.
Meaning into the next budget, not for. Yes.
Yes, but no, thank you. There's a lot of intelligent people at the table making the decision.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Right.
Thank you. Ken?
Version 2.0 had an increase assessment for Bernardston of 8.94%. Version 3.0 moved it to 9.31%, and yet you tell us that the assessment did not increase version 2.0 to version 3.0. Why the change?
Yes, thank you, Ken. I knew that question was going to come up, and it's an unfortunate explanation. It's just that the actual dollar amount didn't change. If you look at both, the total operating assessment didn't change. Unfortunately, I had for FY25 a slightly smaller total operating assessment for Bernardston that when I looked back and looked at the assessments provided by both certified and approved by the district and sent out by the treasurer, that Bernardston's assessment for FY25 is actually smaller than I had put in last time's presentation. So long story short, the Bernardston assessment I put in the last presentation for FY25 was actually incorrectly too high. So when you lower the Bernardston assessment in FY25 to what it really is, that increased the amount. So, and I was, as I saw it, I was very sorry because I know 8.9% is bad enough, but then 9.31% only makes it look worse. And it was just a computational error on my part. So I apologize.
Thank you. So we have on deck Jane, Catherine, and then B, just so you know, in order. So Jane, you're on mute. Still on mute. There you go.
Sorry, it's in a different spot on this facility than it is on the other one I use. I saw that you moved capital, the $80,000 to its own outside of the operating budget. However, you did not change the totals on that section. So you're still counting $80,000 in the operating budget, and now you're also counting it in capital. So I'm wondering why.
Because as I had mentioned, and I probably didn't do as good of a job of explaining it last meeting as I could have, I list it in the budget presentationally because I want it, all in one spot, but I don't count it in the operating budget. So although it was listed, it doesn't actually go into the total in the version 2.0. So if you added up the numbers, which I don't.
Which I did. Excuse me, I did. Mm-hmm. You need to go back and look.
I'm good, but so it's not in there. So what happens is it's deducted out. So it's written down but deducted out. So it isn't in the total all funds budget because it's not part of the operating budget. So I put it there presentationally, so it's nice and highlighted, but it doesn't actually go into the total amount in the operating budget. So it is not still in the operating budget. I mean, it certainly isn't in the FY20 in this version 3.0 because it isn't even a line item. So that's why it doesn't change because it was never in there in the first place. But I know it was. Some people might say confusing is I think an appropriate adjective. So I moved it to reduce confusion. And as your request, I listed the projects individually.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Hey, anything for you, Jane?
Well, and fix the error that I just called to your attention.
Well, it's done. It's past tense, fixed.
I'm looking at the totals that you have in the workbook that you just went through, and the total that you're listing there includes the 80,000, unless my spreadsheet is not working. And when this meeting's over, I will be bringing that spreadsheet up and checking again, and I'll send you an email.
I look forward to it.
So I had that question. Did I have one other question? I was comparing the changes on the, oh yes, in the very last section. What's it called? On the last page, total student services. Forgive me while I get all my papers.
Are you in the special needs section? Pardon? Are you in the special needs section?
Total student services on the very last page.
Yes.
That's the total. That's the name of the total line. Total student services.
Got it.
Got it. Sorry. I'm seeing a line missing there. So the line, you want to come back to me while I figure out what I'm talking about?
Of course. No rush.
All right.
Catherine?
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation and for the material that was sent in advance. I'm going to ask a question that maybe you don't have to answer at this point in time. It's about the insurance, the increase in the insurance, and if you have any knowledge or anticipation that that kind of increase is going to continue, into future years. And this year, you've masterfully managed the budget so that the town assessments aren't taking the burden of that. But how long could we masterfully manage the budget if we keep getting increases like this that we have no control over, really? But I don't, and like I said, you don't have to answer the question now, but I'm thinking ahead, and I'm sure you and Patricia are also thinking ahead, and hopefully the school committee is also thinking ahead. But how's this year looking? Is okay? What do we see for anticipation in the future years, especially if we do move ahead with the feasibility study, et cetera? So it's more a strategic, kind of forward-thinking question that I've got.
Yeah, that's a great question, Catherine. I think I can answer it. I think, I guess, sadly, yeah. I think this probably isn't a one-off. I think that the reason I say that is when we had the meeting, with the group insurance trust, when you look at the increase in pharmaceutical expense, it's actually increasing, month to month. So it isn't something that, okay, this is the big amount and it's done. It looks like it could be the same thing next year. And it all depend on actual usage. But some of the stuff basically, this is the middle case scenario. they could have asked for 25% or something. You know what I mean? This isn't the worst case, and there's potentially still growth there. But the good thing is I think we have things we can do. And so we're thinking of every option. And I guess it's what I want to bring up too is this, although we have to vote on our budget next week, this is kind of the middle of the process between February and July 1st. And then throughout next year, we're going to have to continue to be really cognizant of controlling all the other costs that we can control. Because you're right, we don't control insurance, so we're gonna have some hard work ahead of us. But we're pretty feeling good that we'll figure it out. But so in terms of managing the increase, we're going to continue to think of ways to manage. And I don't want to be spoilers, but we're already thinking of ways because you're right. If it's going to be 18 to 20% again, we need to be. This year's a surprise, so that's bad. But what I'm thinking is next year, you just need to be cognizant of it's not a surprise anymore, and we still need to keep education affordable, and we still need to be able to make really good investments. So it's hard work, but we are confident that there are some solutions.
Great. Well, thanks, Jordan. And as much as possible that you can get your thinking to the towns, because we have to think ahead too. I mean, we'll be making decisions in a number of different ways about our budgets, not only our budgets, but also other decisions that we make as a town in terms of how to manage, our expenses, but also where we're going to participate in terms of a district. So anything that we can all work together, thinking ahead, how to manage these now, what is not going to be a surprise expenses. And then also things like capital improvements. What's 5 years capital improvements in light of some of the other ideas that you all are discussing. So anyway, it's just a request from me that we all begin to talk and speak to each other about future developments, 5-year look at our school and our budgets. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I have on deck B, Sam, and then Hillary. So I see you. All right, B.
Yeah, you can let Sam go first. I have a few questions, and I have a similar problem to Jane, which is I have quite a few spreadsheets open. So let Sam go first.
Okay, thank you. Sam? Sam, can you hear us?
He's on mute.
Yeah, I see he's on mute. Yep, you're still on mute, Sam.
Look along the bottom of the screen, Sam. It's a different application, as Jane pointed out. There's a little microphone button at the bottom of your screen.
Okay. Sam, would you like Patricia to call you? You can give me a thumbs up if that would be easier. Okay, we'll move to Hillary.
Hi, thank you for having this online so I can attend. I'm a parent of 2 BES students and a member of the PTO there. And I just wanted to come back to Lucy's question about the before and after school program for both elementary schools. It just seems like from the great presentation that you just gave, that it would be a direct investment to help increase enrollment and retain student enrollment of students and families that are already living here. So thank you for addressing that.
Oh, thank you for your question, Hillary. And I think just returning to Lucy's as well at the beginning. So the before and after, there's it's not in the budget at the moment. What I think we're committed to doing is looking for grant opportunities that might be able to help. The reason it's not in the budget ultimately is it's quite expensive. And although you can charge for it, from the projections we had, it looked like that it would actually, at best, potentially break even, but potentially also cost more than we could actually bring in revenue based on the enrollment information we had. So I know there's a lot of people interested in it. I think we'll continue to look for grant opportunities, but it isn't something that we, in this budget, have found a way to be able to afford.
Thank you. Is there a direct sort of plan for like who will follow up on that? I know there's a lot of, I believe there's a lot of other parents and residents on the call, and it'd be great to know like what the next step is so that we know who to direct our concerns to, because I mean, it is a really important part of our school experience and ability to stay in the school district.
Sure. I think that likely if there's any change that Patricia will communicate directly with families if there's going to be availability of a program. I know Patricia's on the call. I don't know if she wants to comment if that's accurate.
Yes. Sorry, Melissa. Yes, Hillary, thanks for bringing this up. Lucy, thanks for bringing it up. We are indeed taking another look. Jordan, I appreciate your careful framing of this, that when we have run the numbers on our end, it's expensive to run a good program with appropriate staffing that meets legal requirements in this state. So I will, Jordan and I are going to be working on this again. I'll put something out, and then folks would be directing their questions to me. Thanks.
Okay, Jane or B, I know you were both. Jane, I don't know whether you found your question.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I don't know where I buried it. So when I find it, I'll send Jordan an email.
Okay, thank you. B?
Yeah, hi. Got all my paperwork here, Jordan. Thank you very much. Can you explain the math on the health insurance? Because if I remember correctly from the last meeting, there's two elements to this question. The first one is health insurance. You estimated 10 to 12%, I believe, on the last version of the budget for health insurance, and now it's up to 18. And I think in some cases, depending on, I know for the town, in some cases it's up to 20%. So everyone's kind of in the same boat on the health insurance surprise. And then you're moving the feasibility study to FY27, which is great because I think that takes a significant chunk into the next fiscal year. But given the math between the difference between 10 to 12% on the prior budget on the health insurance moving to 18% on this one, and the large amount associated with the feasibility study moving into FY27, why is the top line still the same and the bottom line assessment still the same, basically? Why haven't we seen some sort of cut, if you will, back to in reducing the top line budget and the assessments to the towns as a result of those changes?
Good question. So the simple answer is because when I showed budget comparisons year to year, I made a little notation that didn't include the feasibility study, because then it would have, thrown things, because you'd have another $950,000. So the feasibility study was never in the year-to-year budget comparison. So that's the big reason that it doesn't show up is, for example, oh, wow, we're spending $950,000 less. Because when I compared the two budgets in the previous presentations, I had always noted that the feasibility study is not in there. So that's the reason.
Okay. So basically you had them in the line items of the detailed spreadsheets that we were looking at the last time, but they weren't counted in your presentation. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, so that people could more accurately compare, year to, because when the slide where I showed, FY25 to 26, so that people could compare on a kind of an apples to apples basis without an additional feasibility study.
Okay. I didn't see that notation, and I'm going to note also from the comparison when you were looking at the fiscal year budgets over time, FY24, when you returned money to the towns, that was because we were over, if I remember correctly, a certain amount on E&D. So while money was returned, and I know it was a choice, I believe that was the language that was used at the time, is it does kind of put a little bit of an apple oranges thing into those budget line items. And ideally, especially missing Warwick, I think this just points out from fiscal year to fiscal year, we're operating with Bernardston, Leiden, and Northfield. And the bulk of the burden is falling on those three towns. So when I look at foundation enrollments, right, and you look at the growth for, say, Bernardston, because Bernardston is really getting it this year. If Northfield had some revenue projects going on, we might be getting it, but we don't. Bernardston does. So in the foundation enrollments, in the growth, you use the total number for PVRS, which I'm assuming that's part of the formula, but Franklin County Tech is high school, so we're not really seeing the apples to apples comparison there, even though those are the enrollment numbers. So I'm wondering, are you seeing for Bernardston, if I look at all my spreadsheets correctly, and I've got two screens open, plus all the paperwork from the last meeting, is the growth coming for Bernardston and others, particularly Bernardston, is it coming in the elementary school level and or the junior high as opposed to high school? Because when I go back and look at my other spreadsheets, I'm seeing Bernardston had, I think, 40 kids in high school last year and 35 this year. So where's that foundation growth coming from that's kind of pushing stuff, right, in your formula? Or not in your formula, but in the state's formula.
Sure. So I'm going to answer the E&D question first. So E&D, we weren't required to return any of that money. I know that was talked about at a select board meeting, and we asked to have the record corrected on that because that was incorrect. We weren't
not required, but that there was a certain amount that you had found in your, I think this is when you came on board, so kudos to you.
Yeah, but it wasn't required. So that was the statement that was made. It wasn't required because we had already.
We're still interested in money coming back to the towns and looking at the comparison over fiscal years. Yeah.
So we had already returned the required amount through our appropriation of E&D in the FY24 budget. So we had already done $400,000 in that budget, or $450,000 in that budget, which put us below the statutory minimum. And then in addition, we sent back $500,000. So that wasn't statutorily required at that point. So that's an important one. So that was definitely a choice. We could have retained that amount of money in the E&D account, but we wanted to return it to the town. So that one is all good news. So that's good news. And then in terms of Bernardston's enrollment, so right, so the biggest reason Bernardston's assessments went up relative to the other two towns isn't an enrollment issue. It is a municipal revenue growth factor. So that is the biggest part of it.
Okay.
And then there's a small part where Bernardston's, I think, I don't know went, basically from 82% to 85% at Pioneer. So that's a part of it, but it's not the big part. And in terms, so right. So yes, some more students, foundation enrollment is going to be a Pioneer versus Foundation, but versus Franklin Tech, but that's not the big part of the story. It's really that municipal revenue growth factor, and I don't know enough about the underlying parts of that metric to say, will that happen to one of the other towns? It certainly doesn't look like it from, I don't know.
Yeah, it has to do with new growth, and Bernardston's got the bulk of it going on. Yeah. Does school choice count in foundation enrollment?
You're right. Those students count for foundation enrollment, but they don't count for the type of enrollment that is counted in the above minimum local contribution for the district.
Okay.
Jordan?
Yeah.
Jordan, could I clarify something there? B, for school choice, the students who live in our towns who choice out, those count for foundation enrollment. Kids from other towns who choice into us who are enrolled in our district don't count for foundation enrollment.
Thanks for the clarification on that. And then I'm just going to mention my annual or perennial comment, which is I really would like to see what the tech school does is programmatic dollars versus the spreadsheets and the budget book, et cetera, is programmatic changes with the dollars attached to them year over year. So when we're talking about priorities, for example, I think what came up at the last meeting was what the academic and curriculum priorities were last year, and we're not seeing some of that thematic information carried over into this year's budget presentation. And that's been a comment in prior years as well. Just in general, the tech school has that really thick document so that you can dig into those details as well. I know everyone doesn't necessarily like to do that, and it can't necessarily be done in one or two meetings, but it's nice to have. And I'm just going to note that as an ongoing interest of mine in particular, as well as having you guys come back to the individual towns to have a discussion about what's unique to the towns in the school discussion here in individual meetings. I think that's something that changed this year as well. So I'm just going to note that as well. Thank you. I really appreciate all the work that you put in, Jordan, and everybody else. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate the openness with which you take the questions. So, because I know you get them every year, and I'm just going to note your background on your screen. Just has been very calming. Mine is mostly like snowplows and stuff out on Main Street here. So I'll let you go, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, B. Catherine?
Okay, more specific question. And I may have missed, I know I missed some of their other meetings because I was away, but the environmental ed program coordinator, that position's been eliminated. And is there no environmental ed program any longer? And I noticed that there's some money that we got from a grant for a pathways for environmental science and career development. So it just fill me in because I may have missed those explanations when I wasn't at the meetings.
Sure, thank you. So you're correct, that position isn't going to exist in the FY26 budget. But the as you're also rightly noted, the district is not moving away, but maybe more appropriately it would be like reimagining and focusing on the middle high school with this environmental science pathway where we have grant funding to help sustain it. And it can be very clearly focused because there's already a model that exists, right, in this innovation career pathway model. So yeah, we're refocusing for the middle high school, but not in any way abandoning environmental education. I mean, I think right from pre-K, the students are getting outside and having a focus on education in the environment they live in. We've applied for some additional grant funding that's focused on creating gardens at schools and providing education around how food is grown and allowing students to get involved in actually growing food. It's a substantial grant. So we applied for that as well. So I think that what ultimately the story is we're still going to do environmental education, but we're going to do it differently. And, choices have to be made in the budget because when we have, and I know you know this, Catherine, these 18 to 20% health insurance increases and revenues that aren't growing quite as fast, the alternative would be to have, assessments that grew even faster. And our approach was, we can't do that. We need to be out in front and control expenses as much as possible. And so we still want to do environmental education. We are going to do it really well. We're probably, and I think it's a good thing. We're going to do it extremely well, and we're going to spend a little bit less money or spend the money differently because it's one of those choices we have to make.
Well, thank you. For me, I think it's important and that we continue to have some programming, and the location of the school itself, the middle and high school right now. I mean, it would be a shame to not use the natural environment around the school as an educational opportunity. But thank you.
Do we have any other questions, comments? Tracy?
Hi, good evening. Let's see if I can make my thing not lower there. Make my video come on. There I am. Hi, everyone. I just had some questions because on both the Winchester proposals and also in the budget book here, there's an emphasis placed on investing in staff. And I know that with the new positions that are listed in the budget book, I think it's on page 4 or 5, only one of them is in fact classroom teacher. And I know as in the union in fiscal year 22, we had 82 teachers on our seniority list, and we're down to currently 75. So that's 8 teaching positions that are offset with that really just one classroom position in the budget book. So I was curious as to what other investments are kind of being thought of in terms of investing in the staff overall, and specifically it's teaching staff that might be on the horizon, given the constraints of the budget.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tracy. So I think, yeah, I mean, you're right on. In FY22, there might have been maybe 150 or 200 more students. So I think that probably, if anything, probably our faculty to student ratio is improving in the sense that we have for every one student, we probably have more faculty than we did in FY22. So in that sense, we're enhancing that. And I think that that's a good story, that as we've looked to tighten up expenditures, we've been cognizant of the fact to maintain as many positions as we can that are student facing. And although some of these aren't classroom teaching positions, I think that I would assume many of our colleagues in the elementaries would agree that having, for example, a behaviorist position or a librarian specialist teacher enhances and or a BCBA, so, makes their work even more successful. So I think that I understand what you're saying, and I think we continue to maintain admirable staffing. And in terms of the investments, I think the wonderful thing about the really good agreement the school committee and the collective bargaining units came to is that it guarantees enhanced investments every single year, because there's a 3-year COLA, which is 50% higher than the certified staff had ever received previously. So, and every year of the agreement adding a step. So there's a guaranteed investment, a greater investment than had historically ever been made every single year of the agreement. So FY26 is not an exception. There'll be a historically positive increase in compensation to all members of your bargaining unit. So it's really good news for investments in the certified staff.
Thank you.
E?
Hey, I was just going to pass along to Catherine's question, because FERCOG ended up dealing, because I sit on FERCOG Finance Committee as well. What they ended up doing was doing a 12% health insurance increase in their budget, and she had a 6% contingency fund. And Ken's on the Finance Committee too. We were just talking about this like a week or two ago. So that when the 18% came through, we actually ended up absorbing what we had in the contingency fund. I don't know if that helps anybody, but I just wanted to pass that along, as that's how it was done with FERCOG. So we didn't have to we didn't really have to adjust the budget. We just had to use the contingency fund.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I think I will call for any final comments or questions. Tracy?
Oh, hi. Just remember, I had another question about the investments improving students' experiences. There was also a note about, I think it's on page 3, maybe. Yes, 3 or 4. About the staff compensation. There was a figure of $125,000 for one-time bonuses. And I was wondering if that is the retention bonus that many staff received for working and not, I was still kind of concerned about the retention of staff year to year, as that's kind of been on average 20 to 25% of our staff has left our union, specifically the PVREA. And so that figure seemed really high, considering there's only 80-ish of us, or 75 currently, staff that, with that kind of percentage of retention, that number just seems a little on the high side. So I was curious about that.
Sure, thank you. And as I know you know, obviously there's, I believe you said 70-some members in the PVRA, but there's also all of the PVASP members as well. Also received a retention bonus, and certain non-director level non-unionized staff also received bonuses. So there was 125 members of staff that received a $1,000 bonus because we want to retain all of our great staff. So, and I think that obviously, a couple other things, quickly I mentioned. So that's the retention, as you say, year to year. And I think, I just want to return to the fact that the year to year that's why it's great that we have 3-year agreements with both unions, so that not only can we provide a 50% higher raise than we ever have in the past and add a step each year, but we can do that again in FY26 and again for FY27. So it's just, that's the great thing about the 3-year deal, is that it continues to just provide compensation of the district at an increasing rate that the district's never been able to provide in the past. So those are all real good things. And I think one obviously mitigating factor from in terms of turnover is the fact that, with Warwick leaving, enrollment going down a little bit, sometimes positions just don't exist because of the decline in enrollment. So I think that what we can say for sure, if we look at one of the things that we definitely can control, because people move for a lot of different reasons, what we can control is the agreement. And what I haven't seen is any agreements that are maybe equal, certainly none better in our area. So that's the one thing that I think, since it's a 3-year deal, will continue to strength over strength, continue to get better each year. And, people still may leave for a variety of reasons, but in terms of what we can control, compensation will just continue to get better. So really good news on that front.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming and joining us for the budget presentation. As Jordan previously stated, our next school committee meeting will be next Thursday, and it will be at PVRS in the library, where we have a lot of agenda items, but one of them will be the budget vote. So we look forward to that and having additional conversation amongst school committee if we need to that evening. All right, so we need to take a roll call adjournment. So will anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you, and roll call. Melissa?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Stephanie?
Yes.
Gretchen?
Yes, thank you.
Michelle?
Yes.
Raina?
Yes.
And Melissa? Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.